Forget gurus. Forget anyone claiming to be an online business expert without going through the challenges of entrepreneurship themselves. The Real Money, Real Business podcast is here to prove the best insights in online business comes from your fellow online business builders. We dig into stories of entrepreneurs selling their business on the Empire Flippers marketplace so that you can learn how they made their business profitable, how they overcame obstacles, and what lessons they learned in their online journey. If you want to take your business and your knowledge to the next level, you've come to the right podcast. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Money, Real Business podcast. We record these interviews so potential buyers have more information about the seller and the business to help them make a buying decision. Now, before we dive in, let's go over a brief summary of this business. It is an affiliate, Amazon Associates, and display advertising business created in December of 2017 in the supplements and health and fitness niches. The average monthly revenue for the business is $16,169 and makes an average of $15,947 per month in net profit. Now, the assets included in the sale are a primary domain and all site content and files, secondary domain, YouTube channel, freelance writer contact details, an email list with around 3,500 subscribers, and just as a disclaimer, Mediavine does require a minimum of 50,000 sessions per month in order to be accepted into their program. So if a buyer's Mediavine application is not approved during the migration process, they do have the option to move forward with a different ad network or reverse the deal. So for everyone listening, you can visit empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing 69175 to learn more about the business, or you can unlock this listing to start your due diligence if you're interested in purchasing this asset. So that is a brief overview of the business for sale. So let's hear from the seller with me today. So welcome to the show, John. How are you doing today?
Hi, Nick. Yeah, doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to learning more about you and your business here. It seems like you have a great business. So to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about your background in building and running online businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I've been involved in tech for a while. Back at university, I studied something quite similar to computer science. And then I went on to work at a fintech startup. Then I went to a paid ads agency. And that was kind of where I learned a little bit about sort of search engine marketing, SEO, and that kind of thing. And then I transitioned to doing like freelance paid ads. And then that was where I sort of freed up the time to try and get my own business off the ground. And so, yeah, it was just a case of working for others, but at the same time doing, I guess, lots of different experiments to see what works and what doesn't.
And so your natural, I guess, the business that you decided to create, interestingly, is mostly organic, it seems. Did your experience in running paid ads, did that help in some way, or did that help you to understand that you did not want to be involved in a business that relied on that?
Yeah, so I think I didn't love, for example, working directly with clients. So I was always interested in having something that's a little bit more like sort of research based or, essentially something a little different. But I'd always had an interest in health, like interest in that side of things, hence sort of the topic of the site, let's say. And I just, for example, when it came to like studying medicine at school, I was a bit averse to like blood and patients and that kind of thing. So I never sort of expressed it in that way. But then when it came to creating content, there was an opportunity to write about something I already had a natural interest in.
Yes, being able to be involved in health without all of the blood. Excellent.
Absolutely. It works for some people and it doesn't work for others.
Nice. So why are you deciding to sell the business now instead of keeping it and growing it further?
Honestly, I'd say at the moment, the idea to sell the business is an experiment. In the past, I've had some interest from other people. I remember a couple of years back, may or may not have heard of him, a guy called Andrew Wilkinson from tiny.com emailed me just to see if the business was available. And I wasn't really at that point in which I wanted to sell it. And I've had other inquiries in the past from, I guess, people interested in the site. And so, yeah, it's coming to the point where I've been running it for, coming up to something like 4 or 5 years. I've got it to a good point where traffic's been going well, the revenue's been going well. If you were going to sell it at a point in time, this would be potentially the best time to have sold it. And so, yeah, I just sort of thought I'd see, if there's some interest out there. But at the same time, if not, then sort of the show goes on. We keep going, we keep building it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, were you aware that you were able to sell your website before you had these inquiries from other people pretty much asking to buy your site?
I would say so, yeah. But I certainly wasn't aware of the intricacies of it. That's something I learned in more recent times.
Nice. Well, it certainly seems like you've had a lot of success with the business itself, and it sounds like a lot of interest, people buying the business as well. So you've definitely come a long ways. It looks like a little over 5 years that you've been working on this business. So what did you learn from building this that worked, or what do you think contributed to the success that you experienced with this business?
I don't think I'm going to have any revelations here that's going to be like novel to SEOs, but sort of a few different things. So like I found in this niche in terms of like the people visiting the site, it's comprised of a lot of people that are like relatively wealthy, relatively well educated, and they are looking as a result for good quality content. So what I've found so far is that trying to create the best content out there, like offering citations and sources to back things up, it seems to pay off. And that actually links something else I was going to mention, that like so far I've been very fortunate and I've never actually had a situation where there's been like a Google update and all my rankings have just dropped. So it does seem to be the case that there's something to having good content. Now, obviously rankings fluctuate day in, day out, and, there's some natural fluctuation, but never, like half my traffic dropped off or something like that. So that's paid off, and it seems to cater to a market of people that want good content. So I find a small thing, but having the comments turned on and interacting with the readers has been quite useful. That's been useful in terms of like learning about what content I can improve and what content I can create as a result of like frequent questions. I've also noticed that like as I'm researching a topic, sometimes I'm just like not sure about something. Like I come across something and it's a bit confusing, and very often that's been an indicator, okay, you need to write about this thing. If you're unsure, other people are likely to be too. And so kind of doing the hard work of trying to understand it and then explaining it in like a simple and concise way has been it's worked out pretty well. And then like sort of abstracting above the layer of like content creation, I've just found it pays to negotiate with. So this business is primarily fueled by affiliate commission. And so it really does pay to negotiate with affiliates around commission. Like I didn't have any experience of that back like when I first started, but bit by bit, I've realized, okay, they can often offer a lot better rates than they're initially letting on.
Man, several good points that you make there. So first, because I think there is a bit of a, I don't know, not a hesitation necessarily, but the fact remains that when getting into the health space, there is a lot of protectiveness or speculation about the legitimacy of information on content sites that are related to health. And I think you did a great job in addressing that, and with the way that you created your content and created the legitimacy around your website. That's one thing. And then, as you mentioned, it's for a customer base who is capable and willing to spend money and are mostly looking for sources of information that they can trust. So I think you did a great job at addressing a good market and being able to provide them with kind of the thing that they need in order to make those purchases.
I would just pick up on that briefly and just say that I think there's sort of two approaches to health. One is you can come from a position of authority and people trust your authority and they say, okay, well, if this person says X, then it must be true. The other position is like, okay, let's just assume that I'm not an authority. Therefore, kind of everything I say needs to be backed, or it's beneficial if it's backed up by sources or references. Like when I say sources, like where did you find this information? Or literally just pointing them to like scientific papers or something like that. So there's two different routes. I don't have the credentials of like PhD or MD or something like that. And so it's gone the route of like references. And I think people like that because ultimately they can verify for themselves, when they've got the sources. So.
Yep, definitely. And the last thing that you said, which was that I liked, was negotiating with the affiliate partners, as that's not really talked about so much in terms of that being a very straightforward way of increasing your revenue potentially overnight by just speaking with your existing partners who are already paying you a certain amount. So yeah, that's some great advice. Well, it sounds like you did a lot right to get to where you are. Was there anything you tried with this business that didn't work out as well?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things that come to mind. So one of the things is that, and it will make more sense if you understand the specifics of what the business is about. But one of the things I found is that if I just write about things that I think are interesting and important, but perhaps are not trending in terms of like, pop culture is not the right word, but trending in terms of popularity, they're just more hit than miss. So I can spend a lot of time creating really good content around a topic and it just not really get the search volume that is warranted. Now, probably to an SEO, that's obvious, but it was something that I had to experiment with. And I was guided by my gut thinking, well, this is important. People need to know about this. But yeah, you can exert a lot of energy and just not get a lot of results. So yeah, absolutely, like try and related to the niche, staying on top of trending topics. That seems to be the way to get good amounts of viewers on the site. And then a second thing was like, I experimented with economizing in terms of low cost writers, but it just really isn't worthwhile. At least I haven't found it to be. Basically, just because you end up spending a lot of extra time editing to try and bring the content up to the quality and standard that you want, that it negates the initial cost benefit. That's something also that as the site's been making more profit, is also become less important. So I think it makes sense to go for almost as high quality a writer as you can afford, and it pays off in terms of time saved later.
Yeah, well said. I think there is a lot, and we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but there's a lot of question about, well, there are many tools and of course resources for finding cheaper writers, less expensive writers, and far less expensive tools to produce content. I think it's a positive or a benefit here to hear that the higher quality content definitely makes a difference here because it makes it more of a defensible website. But we'll get into that in just a little bit. You've built this site up to a certain point. I imagine you're more in a maintenance mode with the site. So can you describe the amount and the type of work that you do on this business to maintain it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say first off, there's a good amount of content that's like close to being evergreen content. And that content requires a certain amount of upkeep, sort of staying on top of the subject area in order to know what updates would need to be made. That's definitely important. At the same time, that is easier than creating new content. So there's a benefit just to keep those evergreen content refreshed and renewed and relevant. And then in general, keeping up with the niche involves following some YouTube content, listening to some podcasts, tracking a couple of membership subscriptions. Yeah, that's another important aspect. Then in terms of, there's one particular writer that I work with and he produces good content, but there's a little bit of editing that needs to be done prior to that going live. So editing content. And then in terms of affiliates, it can be worth keeping abreast of the offers that they're running. And sometimes that can be worth then including them on the website where applicable. You know, if there's like, for example, a particular product that is on a good deal, like website viewers are going to buy that product probably anyway. But if you incentivize them with a better deal, they're more likely to buy it now, let's say. So just keeping abreast of like the products that do well and the offers that are on them. Also, lastly, just there's a constant need for just adding in new affiliates in terms of like brands where applicable. So yeah, there's some of the top things I would say.
Okay. Sounds like nothing too technical, mostly either upkeep or performing a lot of just the normal task that you would expect with a content site and an affiliate focused site.
Yeah, I guess it's in some sense stating the obvious, but yeah, they're the main sorts of things.
Okay. So let's talk about the opportunities then. If you were to keep the business, what are some ways you would try to grow it?
The site doesn't really have a social media presence at the moment. And so that would be like, I think important. I think building out a brand more than I have already is going to be good. So social media presence, work on actually incentivizing growing the email list. I don't really do that at the moment. Add more writers to the team so that I can increase the amount of content production. And then I think sort of now that the site's more established and has some good backlinks and has some sort of domain authority, I think there's the opportunity to expand out a little bit into some new related niches and just see what works and what doesn't, like as opposed to sort of staying 100% focused on what I'm doing at the moment. I think sort of the domain can handle experimenting with similar but slightly different niches. And then this is something that's always been an opportunity, but I've never found the perfect moment to do it or gone down that route, which is, as mentioned, this isn't a secret that the site has a lot of affiliate volume through supplements. And so essentially you could create your own supplement and use the site as a vehicle to kickstart or build the growth of that supplement. So that's probably a big task, but it's a very realistic task.
Yeah, nice. A lot of exciting opportunities there and of varying, I guess, in investment levels. Like guess the highest one being adding an e-commerce component to it. But yes, in fact, some buyers on the marketplace have done this, which is called the bolt-on acquisition strategy. So they either have an existing content site and they'll acquire a physical product business that's in the same space, or they'll do the opposite. They have a product and they'll buy a content site. So just to revalidate the fact that it is definitely a realistic pathway to go if you decide to create a supplement off of the back of this site.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, of course, with any opportunities, there's always risk associated with any business. So what do you think are the biggest risks with this business that a buyer should be aware of?
I would say to sort of kick things off, like the site is reliant on Google traffic, and as comes with vying for the top spots in Google, there's always competition. Ranking's never guaranteed. Despite the fact that I mentioned, it's been very fortunate that the site's never had a big ranking drop off after, say, like a Google update. It's an ever present risk of you need to rank on Google if your site's reliant on Google traffic. So that'd be one. I'd say also this is another sort of self-evident thing, but the income's reliant on affiliates, and affiliates can pull or change their programs at any time. In fact, the site actually went through one of these issues sort of start of this year, where one of the affiliates we were reliant on sort of broad range of supplements just killed their program. I think the economic issues that are taking place might have incentivize that a little bit in terms of I think they just needed to save some money. But yeah, unfortunately, I figured out, as you can see from the revenue, I figured out solutions to that along the way. But that's always an ever-present risk of just affiliates changing offers. And this is maybe a bit more important related to this particular niche. It's just I think it's probably going to be important to have an interest in the subject. There's probably some affiliate and content sites where maybe the content isn't so detailed, but essentially I think it would pay dividends to have an interest in the subject. I think that will help in terms of coming up with new content ideas. And I think it will also help with creating really good quality content that answers questions that people might have. So I wouldn't say that's a risk, but it's just something to bear in mind with the site.
Sure, almost being like your own customer or just part of the audience yourself to be interested in it for keyword research. The fact that you do also go to listen to content. And so if you're not interested in it, then I can imagine that performing those just normal week-to-week operations would be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, and I do see that in the niche. There's a lot of sites that just literally rewrite my articles. And they're not very good, as you would imagine, because it's someone looking at the content and then, okay, let me reword this, let me rephrase this. And so you can tell the difference, to state the obvious, but you can tell the difference when someone's interested in the subject versus someone's just trying to rewrite an article.
Got it. Well, that's good to know that it's difficult to replicate without the same level of attention.
Yeah, definitely. But then, the pros and cons of that, right?
Yep. Okay. Well, a few housekeeping questions then to wrap this up. How much support are you willing to offer a new buyer who acquires this business?
Yeah, so in addition to sort of the standard 30 days of email and phone support, I think it would make sense to potentially do some video calls, Zoom or any other video call platform, which might help in terms of screen sharing and just sort of conveying as much information as possible to sort of get them up to speed. And I think it would probably be very valuable to create some handover content. There'll be some things that I've already got documented, but if there's something that I haven't and it seems important, then I'm more than happy. I will be creating that content so that they can have it nicely documented so that they can, just take over the business and hit the ground running.
Awesome. And just confirming that you commit to a non-compete on this business after it's sold?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing to flag up here is that there's a note on the listing that, if I did sell the business, I might be interested in creating a personal blog. And I have a natural interest in health. So I might talk about some health related stuff. But this would be very much separate and not competing. It's just, without going too deep into what my particular niche is with this website, I don't speak in the first person. Whereas if I did a personal blog, it'd be my experiences of things. I wouldn't be competing on topics and keywords and that sort of thing. So, if you see that in the listing, that's kind of what that's about.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, if anybody listening to this, they have any questions about that, I definitely encourage you to have that conversation with John and just make sure that all is above board.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And are you open to something like an earnout?
Yeah. So potentially, I think I would prefer cash up front, but I'd be willing to discuss the details.
Okay, perfect. And putting yourself in the shoes of a buyer, why do you think this is a business worth buying?
Okay, so we've touched on before, generally speaking, especially in this niche, the quality of the content is high. And I think that's going to be particularly valuable going forward. Domains built up some good authority in terms of the niche, in terms of backlinks. As I mentioned, the people that are reading the site, they tend to be reasonably well educated, and also they tend to have some spending power. So it can be a profitable niche. And so if you've got some ideas about maybe some more expensive affiliate offers that you might want to bundle in, then it's good to know that it's a profitable niche. I think it's probably more suited, as I mentioned, to people who are interested in the niche, and it could particularly suit someone who already has, I forgot the phrase you used for kind of these, was it bolt-on or something like that? But basically, if someone already has a brand of supplements or has some sort of product that they already think would be suitable to the audience, then it could be particularly interesting to those type of buyers. And then I mentioned there are actually actually quite a lot of like competitors that just basically rewrite my articles. And if you look at them, the quality of the content, it's just not really there. But I will say some of them managed to outrank me. So if someone has a better background than me, like I'm not an SEO, I wouldn't call myself an SEO. I've never built backlinks for the site. Yeah, I've got some basic rudimentary knowledge, but if someone's got more knowledge than me, then I think they'd actually be able to just like quite easily outrank some of the articles that are already bad content using their SEO skills. So there's definitely opportunity there. Like, yeah, I'm definitely not a great SEO. And then added to that, like actually just building out backlinks, which is something I've never done, that could boost some rankings and help the site in ways that I can't currently do. So
yeah, I think that's a great point to emphasize, that despite not having backlinks, the site has performed to the level that it has. So for anybody listening to this who has some experience with content sites and probably backlinks as well, which is likely for somebody purchasing a content site of this size, it seems like a very immediate potential growth opportunity.
Yep.
Well, it seems like definitely a lot of exciting growth opportunities here, and also a very interesting niche and sub-niche, I should say, and an angle within the health space. Yeah, I think it could be a great business, whether a standalone or a potential additional business for somebody who has a supplementary site as well. Last question, potentially, is there anything you would like to add that you think I might have missed during the interview?
Yeah, I think it just makes sense to touch on perhaps like the topic du jour at the moment of large language models, things like ChatGPT, Bard, and Bing Chat, and all that sort of thing, and maybe how that intersects with the site currently. Would that be something worth mentioning?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's safe to say that like Google search is going to be changing. There's going to be more generative answers. So perhaps where there was the one box previously, where you'd like highlight an answer from an article, I think those are going to morph more towards generative answers, i.e. answers the language model came up with rather than just pulling directly from a website. So I think there's already been a lot of transition from people going to the Google search results page and then bouncing to a website to actually they get to the search page and they get the answer within the search page. So that's already been happening. But yeah, I think there'll be more generative type answers. But where I think that intersects with this website is initially when you play around with these large language models, the quality is quite good. You're quite impressed. But if you start to talk to them about a subject that you know well, you very quickly run up against their limitations. Now, obviously going forward, I think, they're going to keep improving, but they do have limitations. And once you know that, then very often you want to cross-check the answers because you can quickly run into problems if you just take their word as gospel. And so that's where I think it's going to be very important for sites to create high quality content, to become authoritative and trustworthy. And then they'll be in a good position for when people want to cross-check information. Because, as I mentioned, the quality of the site is quite good, I think this website has the opportunity to become a leader in the space. And sort of as it keeps going down the track of creating high quality content around the specific niche, I think it's going to be a greater likelihood that it's going to be one of those sites that people go to cross-check information. And then with these language models, we sort of talked before the call actually about the idea that they had like a double-edged sword. So they're going to compete with content creators and raise the bar for content creators in terms of what's like the passable bar for good quality content is going to become higher because language models can do so much. But on the flip side, it also makes creating content quicker and easier. And what I found is that one of the things I do when I'm creating content for the site is to delve into a subject area that I'm not familiar with. And very often that means sort of trying to get up to speed with it quite quickly. And you can actually use these language models as like sort of tutoring tools. So they do help you if you're interested in a particular subject to get up to speed quite quickly on it. And I think that's also going to be something that, I can sort of share my tips and tricks on how I do that with a future buyer to help them build up the rate of content that they create. It's definitely going to be a double-edged sword, but I think having high quality content and building trust and authority in the niche, which the site's already on its way to, is going to set it in good stead for the future with sort of the change to these generative models of search.
Yeah, well said. And it definitely has understandably been a point that a lot of buyers have brought up, which is just if they're looking at a specific site, how is this site going to be protected against the existing and future generative AI options out there? And it's a valid point. And I think one of the answers is that some sites will be more impacted by this, are more vulnerable to those realities than others. And in this case, I feel like, as you mentioned, you're in a health space. And I think when it comes to people looking for products and information about their own health, that's something that they don't mess around with that in terms of reading information that's produced from an AI. They want to make sure that it's coming from not only a credible source, but also from a human source. So I think through that, you are in a space, in a niche that is better protected against the generative AI tools because there's more of desire to have content written by a human being in this space. And I think you did bring up a good point about that people are more likely to cross-reference their initial searches with something else. And if this does become that second point, if you will, that they do end up cross-referencing, I could see this becoming a much bigger website than it is at this point.
Yeah, and something else just came to mind on that, which is there are some niches where a lot of the answers to questions have already been figured out. Like the niche has been around for a long time. And so the amount of new content, let's say, that's coming out around that niche is limited. So a language model can digest all of the information in that niche and start spitting out answers that are pretty good. I would say the health space, whilst there's some basic tenets that aren't really going to change, I think there's also a lot of cutting edge science and information that's coming out that's evolving over time. And so a language model is perhaps going to have to try and keep up to date with things. And I think that's also the opportunity for content creators, is to sort of stay ahead and keep producing new content relative to the changes in the niche. So I think also in that sense, like the health sphere is a good one to sort of weather the storm, let's say.
Yeah. And it is kind of in an interesting position because health can be seen as, health has existed for theoretically, as long as human beings have existed. So you could call that an evergreen space. But the fact that you are in a space that's focused on kind of the forefront of health, it's almost like it's continuously new content that's being then kind of solidifying itself within the evergreen space. So it's like you're creating new content that's timely and relevant at that time, which can leverage trends at that specific time, but is likely to, I guess some health things could be a fad, but in many cases, the type of content that you're putting out, it seems like it's likely to solidify itself as evergreen content once it's posted and once it kind of gets past that initial trend as well. So interesting balance that you have there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Well, great points that you bring up here. I think this is the perfect place to wrap this up. So, John, thank you so much for sharing your story and joining us on today's episode. And yeah, I hope your business is purchased in the near future and by the right buyer.
Cool. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. To learn more and see if this listing has already been sold, head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing number 69175. And if you're watching this on YouTube, click the link in the description to go straight to the listing. And once you've unlocked this listing, you'll be given everything you need to know about this business. So until next time, enjoy your digital journey.